r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? I worked in a hospital and an alcoholic guy I knew from around my town came in. Of course he was very drunk, so he got to bed. He was homeless at this point. Just as he was starting to settle, he screamed. I slit his ducking throat. So I went up to him and asked him to settle, and he started telling me that he did it while in the army and could never forgive himself for it. Cried himself to sleep and died in the local park a few months later. Just goes to show how little our country supports veterans who gave up their mental health to defend it. Yes, the thing that gets me is how homeless veterans is so common. How dare our country care so little about the people who fight for our country that they let them become homeless and go without proper therapy. It's a similar camp to doctors and essential workers now. Everyone says they're heroes. Nobody bothers to help them. Once at a college party, this big guy got upset, picked up the table and threw it across the room, shouting my uncle molested me. Everyone was terrified, but we all felt really bad for the guy. Damn. Fingers crossed somebody that helped him into therapy. That statement will stop a party dead in its tracks, and honestly for his sake it's good that it did. Yeah, it was heartbreaking when he started to break down and cry after realizing what had just happened. Needless to say, the party was over. Next party. Dude, let's not invite Joe this time. But seriously, I hope that the moment was cathartic for him, and now that it was out there, that he was then able to talk about it and find closure and justice. If my ex was still in love with me, I wouldn't be married to you. Oh my god. I still think about it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. It keeps me up at night sometimes. Are you still married with them? I heard my mom tell her friend I was a mistake and the reason her and my dad divorced. That's why you don't eavesdrop. After my mom died, I was going through her email. We never had a good relationship, pretty much ever. Anyways, I went in her Gmail and just did a search for my name. Found a part where she told my aunt how she didn't like me and wishes I would just go away. It wasn't the least bit surprising, and I've said the same thing about her, but it still stung a bit. The thing we always fought about was her drinking. She was a chronic abusive alcoholic. As just a stranger, this made me hurt for you. I hope you have moved on and are not only okay but thriving. Alcoholics rarely give a shit about anyone but themselves. Everyone is just a barrier to drinking more. It's a horrible place to be and a worse place to witness. Sadly, I know whereof I speak. Hope you're doing okay. My sister's boyfriend at the time told me he thought he might have fallen for the wrong sister. Doesn't compare to most of these, but my sister is my best friend, and I was so scared he might ruin that. Edit. Since a lot of people have asked. No, I never told my sister about it. Another edit. They broke up very shortly after this. Because he was untrustworthy in other ways. He stole some money. She kicked him to the curb. Sounds like that shit was already ruined, lol. Neither of us ever mentioned it to her, but yeah, they broke up not long after for other trust issues. Namely, he was stealing from her. Not a great dude. Edit. My sister and I are fine. Closer than ever. Feel for you. I had a similar situation but with my cousin. We were super close with each other. Very much like sisters. Her boyfriend was around a lot and had always gotten along with him too. We had a really nice group dynamic. Then he tells me out of the blue that he wants to be with me instead and was only still dating my cousin so he could see me. Was such an awful moment. I brushed him off and didn't tell her about it. They broke up later because he was cheating with another girl. I'm glad they did because a terrible guy, and B, I honestly would have had no idea how to go about telling her. A coworker told me she went all angel of mercy and smothered her elderly, dementia-ridden grandmother while she was sleeping. The next Monday in the office was definitely a weird one after that particular happy hour confession. My granny always tells us to push her out onto a nice flow when she can't think for herself anymore, which is slightly disturbing but fine, until she semi-ironically talks about going into her friend's dementia home and machine gunning all the old people. Insane to think about a disease existing that affects pretty much only your generation and wipes out memories, personality, pride. Think she's using dark humor to deal? Almost certainly. She has done a lot of volunteering with cancer patients and has probably seen a lot of people die that she knew well. as well as get dementia. Luckily she still has people around her and we make sure she is doing alright. She has kids and grandkids as well, which helps I think. I have a friend whose grandmother married her late husband's friend. One day while drunk he confessed to killing her first husband. She packed up the kids and left. Did she report him? Did he kill the first husband to get her for himself? Or did he marry her out of guilt? I have questions. I think the second killed the first to get with his wife. I just asked my buddy if she ever went to the police. They assume that she did call the police. At a family gathering my grandma got tipsy and started to tell stories from her childhood. While she does this every time no matter tipsy or sober, guess it's just a normal grandma thing. This time it took a dark turn. She told us a story that is the reason she hates to go to the dentist and particularly hates the drilling part. She told us a story about when she was 6 years old. During WW2 my family lived in Hamburg, Germany, right next to the harbor. During a particular week in 1943 the city was continuously bombed and over 35,000 people died and more than 100,000 people were injured. The houses that were hit mostly burned down, creating a huge fire with such force that I sucked not only oxygen in, creating strong winds, but also people. The fire created such heat that people running out of their burning houses got stuck in the molten asphalt on the streets and burned to death. As it was all happening around her, that particular smell was present for over a week in her part of the city. Drilling in your tooth creates exactly that smell. My grandma had to stop the dentist as she recognized the smell immediately. This story shook us to the core as it came out of the blue. It still sends chills down my spine. For anybody who wants to read more about it, Operation Gomorrah, edit, r/World War II stories if anyone wants to share their grandparents' story. My story can't compare with yours in significance, and it has nothing to do with drinking. But, my mother always hated driving over a particular bridge, one that had a metal mesh as the roadbed. The sound the tires make is very particular. We used to tease her about it for years. One day she had enough and told us why. When she was away in World War II, she went out to party with some sailors. One of them had a car with running boards, and one more sailor wanted to come along. One the other guys didn't like. They told him to ride on the running board and hang on. When they went over a bridge with a similar roadbed, they hit the gas, and the extra sailor fell off and was run over. She was still carrying the guilt 40 years later. I'm sorry that she had to live with that. Telling someone probably lifted a lot of weight off her chest. Accomplice guilt is a horrible thing. I may have made up that word, but you get the drift. Oof, that's a terrible thing to happen. I mentioned that smell to my dentist and said I can smell burning matches and he said it's sulfur. Can't imagine having it tied to a memory like that. Night before his wedding day. I'm still in love with C, but I'm still gonna marry F tomorrow because it's too late now. Let's wait until we have children and a house to duck up F's life. F up F's life. Won't do any good changing the letters cause we all know you're talking about Rachel and Emily. Edit. Wow, I had a brain fart. After a work party, the wife of a colleague and me ended up being the last two people standing. We were both fairly drunk when she started telling me about how she was raped by a priest when she was a kid. The church covered it all up and the bastard never faced any charges. Most awkward co-worker encounter ever later. Hey Sam, so did you run into that traffic on 94? The priest was 94 years old, emotional breakdown. And his name was Father Traffic. Went on a work do and my co-worker, a major stone-faced bland woman, got pretty drunk. Ended up telling me she discovered her dad's body when he hung himself. Needless to say, I realized why she was the way she was after that. I am that woman now. I used to be a super cute young vibrant lady, but now I am 32 and fat and dumpy. I don't take care of myself much. I held my dad as he died and then screamed and cried for what felt like hours. I feel like I am still screaming and haven't woken up yet. I want to die. Had a buddy tell me his friend drunkenly confessed to him that he had killed his stepdad and made it look like a suicide. His stepdad had been abusive towards him and his mom for years and it finally broke when he made it look like his stepfather had hung himself in their garage. I don't know who the friend was. I was never given a name or much else of the story. The second year after I graduated from HS, all of us in the graduating class, 22 total, went on a camping trip. One of the dudes got really drunk and we were just catching up when he confessed that to the whole class, that he killed his mom's BF. He was always come and go anyway. He was a truck driver, would regularly cheat and spend the night week with that woman. Rinse, wash, repeat. Him being mere was no cause for alarm. He also was abusive towards his mother. He has gotten into fights, pulling him off his mom. We all just looked at each other. The dude who was sitting closest to him just patted him on the back and we passed him the joint. I don't think anyone has brought it up since. A friend of mine died from a drug overdose. After the funeral, a mutual friend of ours and I were getting drunk when he broke down crying. He asked me if I remembered the time when he and our dead friend told me about an accident that they'd witnessed where they saw a truck driver die. I told him I did. He then told me the most ducked up shit. He said that our friend ran up to the dying man and stole his wedding ring, and that the man couldn't do anything but look up, terrified, at our friend as he was being robbed. I knew they were bad into drugs, but I never thought they could do anything like that. I grew up with them. They were like my brothers. I don't really trust anyone completely anymore. No drugs or alcohol involved, but I have somewhat of a similar story. A few years ago, my mom witnessed an accident. A lady was texting, blew through a red light, and T-boned a truck with an elderly man driving. My mom jumped out of her car and held onto him while waiting for an ambulance. The girl who hit him, early 20s, was freaking out and called her mom. The mom showed up first and kept telling my mom, just tell the cops he ran the red light. No one will know. And he died. My mom heard his last words. Sounds. Really? That she repeated for weeks. My mom cried for days. She met the family, and it was the man and his wife's anniversary, or something like that. We obviously told the cops the truth, but we don't know any of the follow-up. His obituary is framed on our wall. I hate to think the last thing he heard was just tell the cops this was his fault. Whoa, that's heavy. I hope your mother is doing well. Of all the stories in this thread, this one bothered me more than the rest. My ex told me that he had been molested by his sister between the ages of 6-11. She was 9-14. His dad walked in once and didn't do anything. His own family knew that he was being sexually abused for years and did absolutely nothing to protect him. I'm afraid it's likely that the sister was being molested by the father. She was the mom's daughter from another marriage and her first husband had molested her. My ex's dad was the second husband and no, he didn't touch her. He just didn't care that she touched his son. What is he and the sister's relationship like now? Did it badly affect him mentally? I had a male friend tell me he had raped me once when I was passed out drunk. I'm a straight male and had been friends with this guy for 15 years and had been drunk with him a lot. Since then I have found out a lot of messed up stuff about him. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Growing up gay in a small town, I was the only gay person I knew for most of my life up until adulthood. I get sick with guilt when I read stories like yours because of how inappropriate and pushy I was with a straight friend when I was a teenager. But I never would have assaulted him like that or touched him period without his consent. It's just that he was kind of all I had. It's hard to accept no gracefully when you're young and lonely. Maybe I'm just rationalizing what a dong I was. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm making what happened to you about me somehow. I hope you're okay. Life is just so goddamn ducked up sometimes. Thank you. I'm doing great and I've dealt with it. I have no bad feelings toward anyone and I've learned to understand people and why they do what they do. I have never let this affect my love and support for the LGBT community. When I was younger, one of my mates used to always look at me funny, and the ducker was only 3 years older than me, but for some reason he would wink at me and blow kisses at me and flick his tongue at me and always gave me a real weird feeling. I was only 16 at the time and it used to make me so ducking angry. I told my buddy about it and he said, now you must be imagining it. Then years later I heard the guy who used to do this to me had went to a house party and said to the host, don't duck me about or I will rape your wife and your bare needless to say the host went, grabbed a knife and carved the guy's face up. You never know, with some people you can suspect, but you never know. The guy that used to make the faces I believe was trying it on with me even though I'm straight. One of my best friends since middle school opened up to me the day we had our last day of high school. We had been partying all day, got off at 10 AM, but most people left at around 3 PM to go get ready for the seniors dinner and after party and whatnot. My friend stayed behind with our class president. I told him I'd pick him up for the dinner and left. When I got back, both were falling down drunk and in tears. A few years earlier, our class priest had lost his father. I take my buddy back to his house so he can get change for the dinner, and on the way he tells me what happened. They had kept drinking when everyone left and eventually got to the topic of their dads. I had never met my friend's dad. He died and that was all I knew. I never knew how he died. It turns out my buddy's dad was a lawyer or something in the country he's from and was being extorted by a gang. When money started to run out, my buddy's dad sent the family to another country and told them he'd meet them there, that he had to finish some things up. A few weeks after moving they learned that he had been murdered by the gang. It completely ducked my friend up. We always used to drink heavily and whatever since we were in high school. For me it was just drinking. For my buddy it was numbing the pain. It was ducking shocking when he told me this, and really made me understand him a lot more. Why he acted how he acted. I had someone tell me that he molested his daughter when she was an infant because he was angry and thought that his girlfriend had cheated on him and that she wasn't his biological daughter. He went on to say DNA testing was done and it was determined that she was actually his daughter and that he felt very guilty about the whole thing. His daughter was 7-8 at the time he told me this. I literally spent a night tossing and turning thinking about it and finally decided I had to report him. So he felt guilty only when he learned that she was his daughter? He's a regular rapist, not an incestual rapist. That's a really odd reason to molest someone, let alone a child. He probably told himself that's why he did it, to make himself feel better or something. People are sick. I'm glad you reported it. Haha, I put a dare all in your beer. We're gonna party till the sun comes up, bro. Spiking people's drinks is so scummy. Is there any more to this story? At one point he whipped out a knife and put a hole in the surprisingly thin bathroom wall of the dive bar. Shithead carved his name above it. I had a massive mood swing and got in a really nasty parking lot fight. I woke up with dried blood on my knuckles, heart beating out of my chest, and paralyzing anxiety. The guy was like the Kenny Barney of our friend group, always spastic and obnoxious, and taking things past the point of being entertaining. No one ever wanted to hang out with him one-on-one. I thought I was being a good guy by giving him a shot. This effectively got him ostracized from our friend group. More like the Bill Cosby of the group. A woman I went to school with was killed one night in really mysterious circumstances and no one could work out why or who did it. In the end, one of the officers investigating would spend hours, even days, sitting in his car just watching who walked past and the scene a lot. He got to know people's routines and even followed people. Most ended up walking to a house or a shop or a school nearby or a bus stop etc, but one guy he followed would walk to his house about 2 miles away and gave him some suspicious. So he waited outside his house one morning to see where he went before he walked past the murder scene. Turns out he went nowhere. He would just walk up to the murder scene and then home again. He ended up finding more out about the guy and he was a convicted sex offender. That wasn't enough though to go on, so he ended up making up a story and releasing to the press saying someone matching this description had been assaulted somebody and if there's any more victims please come forward. A woman came forward and said a man tried to drag her into a disused school one night. They shown her the picture and she said yes, that's him. Raided his house and found a blood-stained necklace and some hair in a wooden box that matched the woman from my school who got murdered. This detective, banking on a murderer returning to the scene of the crime, ended up solving 2 cases in one and putting a rapist and murderer away for life. That is some very good detective work. Yay, that's one badass detective for sure. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out that same day and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother since I had no siblings and he confessed to beating the shit out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born but my twin brother died in the womb. At the time my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good, so he claimed to doctors that she just fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay. I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life. Whoa, sorry to hear that. A coworker was pretty inebriated when he told me that he hates his life. He hates his partner, and the only reason he's still married to her is because he loves his daughter and doesn't want to lose her. Hate to say this, but that's a huge drawback as a dad. Dads certainly don't get custody as much or treated as well in the court system. Getting a divorce could really mean you don't get to see your kids. A lot of guys stay in bad relationships because the thought of not seeing their kids every day is too much to handle. When I was 14, my mom took me and my sisters and a couple of our friends to the beach. My sister, 15, and I got our own room with our 2 friends and wound up meeting some boys and getting drunk. My sister's friend, 15F, was really drunk and got super upset and confessed that her stepfather had been sexually molesting her, raping her, for years. Really horrible stuff. It sobered everyone up fast. We rallied around her, told her we were there for her, yada yada. But when we got home from the beach trip a few days later, I knew I needed to tell my mom. After I told my mom, she got the state police involved. There was a trial, and the man wound up sentenced to 8 years in prison. It turned out he was doing it to the younger sister as well. Ducking, like and subscribe.